Joining us now, the former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Ron Vitiello. This is his first exclusive interview since President Trump abruptly pulled his nomination to be the permanent director of ISIS, saying he wanted to go in a, quote, tougher direction. Ron, thanks very much for coming in.
Appreciate it.
I want to get to all of that, but first of all, tell us why you decided you wanted to sit down and tell the American public what happened to you and what's going on.
This is an opportunity for me to talk about what the conditions that these Border Patrol agents and the men and women of ICE are facing in this crisis at the border. The humanitarian crisis, the security crisis that it's causing. You talk about all of the conditions that we just saw in these reports, it's terrible. When you're more than 100% over capacity in a holding facility that's only designed for people to come in for the booking process, you take their fingerprints, you take their biographic information, and then you move them through the system. The system is overwhelmed at every level.
The president just tweeted, as you just heard moments ago, these immigrants, these people are living far better now than where they came from and are in far safer conditions. But when you look at these images, you hear these eyewitness accounts of these kids having to deal with no soap and no showers, no toothbrushes, no toothpaste. It's horrendous.
We started talking about this while I was still in government last fall when we saw the numbers coming back. We've been asking for relief, both on the humanitarian side and the security side, and we've asked Congress multiple times to change the way the laws are operationalized that would stop encouraging people to send or bring their children to the border. When no action is taken as it relates to how these laws are operationalized, we're going to get overwhelmed. They're currently overwhelmed. They have been for many months.
So when the president tweets these words, what he's saying, is he wrong?
He's saying that the situation is bad. He's been talking about this crisis for weeks and weeks. For a long time, people ignored it. People who could do something about it have ignored it, and they claimed it.
But when he says many of these illegal aliens are living far better now than where they came from.
They're not living in those places. They're only there for a short amount of time so they can get processed and put in the system and move down the road. All of the people that come with their children are being released.
But some of them are being held for pretty long periods of time under these awful conditions.
Under the law, the children have to be held until they can get into the care of HHS, Health and Human Services. That's by law. There's no options there. The people who come illegally have to be processed. We have to know who they are. We have to give them their opportunity to make an asylum claim and an immigration court appearance. So they have to be held until those conditions are met.
The Inspector General, you saw his report, from her report from the Department of Homeland Security, describing horrendous conditions which are shocking not only people here in the United States, but people all over the world.
When you're more than over 100% over capacity, you're going to have conditions that none of us will be proud of. Those are highly regulated facilities, but those facilities were designed to handle people in the book-in procedures, nothing more.
But you've gone through this Inspector General report. Do you agree with the conclusions?
I've not seen the conclusions of the report. I've only seen the headlines.
But would you agree with the headlines?
I agree that there's a crisis down there, and the OIG seems to have stated the obvious, that they're overwhelmed and they need more resources.
So what needs to be done to alleviate this crisis?
Well, the supplemental funding that the president waited 60 days for Congress to act on will add capacity in the HHS continuum, so they'll get more capacity to get children out of CBP custody faster. CBP will also get additional resources for contract medical staff and for additional facilities, soft-sided structures, so they have a more adequate place to process the people that they take into custody, because there are thousands of people coming to the border every week.
This potentially is a very dangerous situation, not only for these migrants, but for Border Patrol agents who have to deal with them.
That's absolutely true. They didn't sign up for this kind of work. They are in the same conditions that these people are at. Fortunately get to go home at the end of the night, but they're subject to the same maladies that occur in these facilities when you have overcrowding and they're overcapacity.
But this notion that a lot of people simply can't understand why kids can't take a shower, can't brush their teeth, can't wash themselves.
The facility is overwhelmed. The conditions are overwhelming. There's only so much floor space. There's only so much room in these locations for people to be processed. I can assure you they're working as fast as they can to do this and adjusting facilities as this money comes online.
The acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Kevin McAleenan, he's now ordered an investigation into this report that we've all seen by now, quoting a very disturbing, inexcusable social media activity allegedly involving current Border Patrol agents. So this private Facebook page with thousands of people participating. You saw the report from ProRepublica, mocking immigrants, members of Congress. First of all, were you aware of this Facebook post?
Not until the headlines came out.
You didn't know that all these people were involved in this?
I did not.
You were not a member of this?
I was not.
Would you have allowed it had you still been on the job?
Agents hold a public trust. They deserve the public trust, and they work hard to maintain it. If people went on Facebook and conducted misconduct activities that were against the ethical conduct that we expect of Border Patrol agents, the Secretary's call for an investigation will uncover that, and they'll be held to account for what they did.
Let's get to your nomination to be the ICE director. In April, you were supposed to travel with the president to the southern border, but instead he announced he was pulling your nomination. First of all, how did you find out about that?
My staff had heard rumors. We had gotten contact from Congress about the nomination.
Did you have any direct interactions with the president?
I did not.
Did you ever meet with the president?
I met with the president when I agreed to take the job, yes.
And what did he say to you?
When I met with him?
Yeah.
He wanted to assure me that he was going to submit my nomination, and we talked about how difficult the work would be.
But in explaining why he was pulling your nomination, he said he wanted to go in a, quote, tougher direction. How did he explain that to you?
Well, he also said on camera that I was a good guy, so I choose to focus on the glass half full.
But what did he mean what was your understanding when he said he wanted to go in a tougher direction?
I have no idea. I don't know what he knows. I don't know what he was told about my conduct. I was trying to do two things simultaneously. I was trying to operate and run the agency while seeking and getting a confirmation for the nomination.
Has he chosen, as far as you know, and you spent a long time in this position, has he chosen someone with tougher immigration positions?
I have no idea.
And he has never called you to explain why he was pulling your nomination?
I don't know what the president knows.
Because you dedicated your career to this entire process. And so how do you feel right now seeing what has happened, first of all, to you, but also to the entire Border Protection personnel?
Me personally, I had a good run. I did everything I could to help protect this country and maintain the oath that I took in 1985. I'm disappointed that all of the urgings of the department, when I was at ICE and when I was at CBP, for us to have them act to fix the situation on the border, the tools are in their hands. This administration has done more to address this problem than any administration I've seen in my 34-year career.
So what would you be doing differently right now if you were the ICE director?
Differently, not much.
You would not. How would you deal with this crisis? There's a crisis underway.
Well, we would take the supplemental funding and add capacity in the enforcement continuum, that making sure that there was enough space for the single adults that are coming to the border, and then putting more contract money on transportation to move people out of CBP custody quicker.
Would you be doing raids on individuals who are already here and getting them expelled?
ICE doesn't conduct raids, but interior enforcement is an important calculus for this problem.
So what would you be doing in that regard?
As it relates to
removing individuals, removing migrants who cross the border, let's say, illegally.
So when they're ordered by a judge after their due process opportunity, it's the job of ICE and the deportation, enforcement removal operations to find those folks and get them removed.
But Border Patrol, how would you deal with Border Patrol with these individuals?
Border Patrol, this supplemental funding, they'll address the facilities as they can, working closer with Mexico as the president has leveraged them to do more than they've ever done before. Good levels of communication there at the border so that we can implement further the migrant protection program.
You were the former deputy chief of the U.S. Border Patrol. To the average American,
I was the chief for a bit as well.
And you were a chief too. So what do they need to understand about what this job is all about?
It's a difficult job. It requires dedicated men and women that work hard each and every day to protect and serve this country.
What you're hearing from your former colleagues, and I suspect morale is pretty low right now.
They're overwhelmed. They're in a situation that they did not choose to be in. It's a situation that they can't get themselves out of. There's one tool here that needs to be put into place, and that's new legislation that addresses the Flores settlement and that looks at the way TVPRA treats unaccompanied children. We have to dissuade people from sending or bringing their children to the border. Otherwise, this misery is going to continue. It's going to continue in those countries. It's going to continue in Mexico and at our own border.
How much of the blame do you put on the president right now for taking this decision to detain individuals that previous administrations weren't detaining?
That's got nothing to do with what's happening at the border now. What's happening at the border now is there's no consequence if you bring or send your child. In my career, when we have been able to hold people during the pendency of their immigration hearing and remove them,
but you're detaining a lot more people now than you used to.
Because there's a lot more traffic at the border than there's ever been.
So who's to blame for that?
The law, the way it's operationalized. Congress has failed to act to close these loopholes.
But what about the funding for all of this?
Well, they waited 60 days to give the president a supplemental request that addresses the exact humanitarian concerns that are raised in the OIG report.
You spent a whole career, and as you know, the president has cut aid to what's called the Northern Triangle, these countries, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and as a result, the situation there has deteriorated, in effect causing a lot more people to try to flee to the United States.
So it's important for us to continue a dialogue with those countries and help them do law enforcement and governance in those countries. And I think if those programs were effective, I'm sure that the funding would be restored.
So was it a mistake to stop the funding?
No, I don't believe so.
You would have stopped the funding as well?
Well, there has to be some leverage applied to these locations. It worked on the tariff threat with Mexico. Let's see what happens in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. They're very concerned in those countries. The leadership there wants their youth to stay in those countries.
Final question. What do you say to the families of these individuals who are suffering along the border right now here in the United States of America?
I would tell them to not send their children or bring their children to the border.
But if they feel threatened, if they're endangered where they are right now, and there's gangs, they got to do something to save their kids.
Yeah, I think that they need to address that at home. I mean, I feel for these people. You cannot be a border patrol agent for as many years as I was without showing a significant level of compassion.
But isn't this a country that has always welcomed people who are so endangered?
And we still do.
But we don't. Right now, it doesn't seem like we're welcoming them.
The law is they're all coming in, and they're only in custody as long as they can be processed to be released. And many of them have not shown up for their subsequent hearings.
So, look, we're all grateful to you for speaking out. This is an extremely, extremely important issue right now. It's affecting so much of public attitude about what's going on. And I'm glad you came here to tell our viewers how you feel, because this is so significant.
I believe Congress has to act. We need to put ourselves in a situation where people can have their due process while they're in custody so that they can be removed.
Congress has to act, but the president has to act as well.
The president's done everything he's got. He's used all the tools he's had at his disposal.
There's nothing else he can do?
I don't believe so.
All right. We'll leave it on that note. Ron Vitiello, good luck to you. Thanks very much for coming in. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.